Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this great event at Politics and Prose. I'm Lissa Muscatine. I'm co-owner of the bookstore, along with my husband, Brad Graham, who is over there. Say hi to Brad. Thank you. And on behalf of our incredible staff here, we are so happy to see so many people come out for the launch of this wonderful book, Driven to Write, which we'll get to in a second. I also want to give a shout out to a wonderful, amazing group of high school students from the School for Ethics and Global Leadership who are here and there, who are not current writers. Well, they are current writers, but they are definitely future writers. And we're so happy to have them with us tonight as well. Let me just begin by saying this may be a slight hyperbole. You guys will have to, panelists will have to tell me, and Ellen and Michael, that there is no collection like this. Driven to Write, 41 writers on the mysteries of their art and craft. It's the first compilation that I know of in which writers of all types are given a chance to excavate their deepest thoughts and feelings about being writers, to plumb the mysteries of their writing, and then to convey in writing what motivates them to ply their craft. Now, how did this wonderful book come to be? Well, it wasn't because a group of editors and writers and publishers and the normal kind of crowd decided it needed to be done. It was because two curious clinical psychoanalysts, Ellen Pinsky and Michael Slevin, lovers of good writing and writers themselves. Ellen taught English, high school English, middle school English, many years of middle school English, 11 and 12-year-olds for many years. And Michael was a journalist for many years before they turned their attention to people's inner psyches and thoughts as psychoanalysts, clinical psychoanalysts. Anyway, they wanted to better understand not the techniques for that make good writing, but the experiences and emotions lurking deep in the psyche that drive a person to write. And so they put together a list of questions, and they asked writers of all genres and backgrounds, poets, scientists, novelists, journalists, songwriters, public intellectuals, and academics, to muse, or in their words, explore writing as a psychological necessity. The result is quite astonishing. 41 writers, some well-known, some less well-known, responded with candor, intimacy, and bravery in describing the deepest and even darkest places inside themselves that propelled them to become writers. What one learns reading these remarkable essays is that every writer is different, as are their motivations, fears, and dreams about writing. That's because, as this collection makes clear, writing is and should come from a place that is profoundly personal. So I want to also salute Michael and Ellen for treating this project with such care, compassion, and respect. They were entrusted with intimate, even painful comments from writers, yet each contribution in the collection is celebrated for its uniqueness, clarity, and poignancy. And you'll find among the contributors, it's a dazzling, dazzling list, I have to say. A Nobel Prize winner, winners of the National Book Award, several Pulitzer Prize winners, National Poet Laureates, as well as writers whose names you may know from books, newspapers, and magazines. And so we are so honored, as I said earlier, to launch this collection and to have the co-authors and some of the contributors with us tonight. First, the editors. Ellen Pinsky, as I said, is an author herself. She's written a highly acclaimed collection of essays called Moral Gifts. And Michael Pinsky has published a book, The Trauma of Racism, which brings questions surrounding attitudes about race to students and practitioners in his field of psychoanalysis. I think you guys both wanted to say a few little somethings.
Very brief.
Very brief. Please take the mic.
Thank you. Wow. I agree. There's nothing else like it. Mainly, I want to express my gratitude. I want to say thank you to all of the contributors who gave us so much in writing their pieces. I also want to give a shout out I want to thank Michael for being a wonderful person to work with. I want to thank the editorial assistant who helped us so much in bringing this book to where it is, Rachel Dillon, and also Lauren Hunt, who has also helped us with this event and many other things. And mainly a thank you. I want to also, I'm holding this up here, you can see it here. I also want to say a thank you to my very dear friend, Betty Cruz, who took this picture of this 5-year-old child over 40 years ago in Berkeley, California. And Betty was a professional photographer. She died very recently. Betty took this picture of our daughter, Elizabeth, holding that pencil. So for me, it captures the spirit of what's in this book. So I hope you enjoy it. It is for your pleasure. Thank you. Michael, did you want to say something?
I don't think I can begin to touch either what Ellen or Lisa has said already. And so I'm going to be brief about something else, which is that for me, I write in this book about where my writing begins and where it continues and where it is hopefully still continuing. But I also want to write about where, but that was writing, but writing and psychoanalysis and writing history, which is also very important to me and is woven in and out of various pieces that are written here by Robert J. Lifton, who's now in his 90s and has written a beautiful piece about writing called On Being a Writer, my writing, my story. And it is something which I first entered in 1967 with his book, Death in Life, about the Hiroshima, the bombing. And I want to bring that up because we are just a few days apart from the 80th anniversary of Hiroshima's day, August 6th of this year. And so I just want to bring it to town. But this piece about Robert J. Lifton, which was written, says, we write because our sense of self requires us to write, but exactly what drives us, that requirement, is never really clear. So we create stories about it. My story begins with a walk in Hong Kong in late April of 1954. And I think that is where we are beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen and Michael. And we are also so grateful and privileged to have with us four writers and contributors to this collection. And I will start with, I'll start at the end. Jane Leavy is the author of Make Me Commissioner, to be published on September 9th from Grand Central Books, and she will be having an event here at Politics and Prose on September 28th. So please make sure you come. She has written 3 national bestsellers, The Big Fella, Babe Ruth and the World He Created, The Last Boy, Sandy Koufax, A Lefty's Legacy, and the comic novel Squeeze Play, which Entertainment Weekly called the best novel ever written about baseball. I have to say, it's the most hilarious novel ever written about sports. It is so funny, it's amazing. You've got to read it. She's also a former colleague of mine. I feel very, very privileged to say. She was a staff writer at the Washington Post, first for the sports section and then for style, and our careers overlapped there. And like zillions of others, I became an instant Jane Leavy fan. Not surprisingly, her pieces have been anthologized already in many, many collections, and now she can add a new collection that she's represented in. Next, we have Julius Hobson, Jr., has over 50 years of experience in and around Washington politics, having served as a policy advisor and senior staffer in the House and Senate, member of the D.C. Board of Education, as an advisor to Howard University on federal and congressional affairs, currently a senior policy advisor at Polsinelli. He advises and lobbies on a number of contemporary issues, and he's an adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University, where he teaches lobbying and legislative writing and research. Robert Pinsky was the United States Poet Laureate from 1997 to 2000 and founded the Favorite Poem Project. His most recent book of poems is Proverbs in Limbo. His poem jazz album of the same title is available on Spotify and Apple Music. His books of prose include Democracy, Culture, and the Voice of Poetry. And just as a point of personal privilege, Ellen mentioned Betty Cruz in the photograph of your daughter being taken in Berkeley. I'm from Berkeley. My parents were longtime Berkeley residents, and we're part of that whole crowd and very close to the Cruzes. So it's coming full circle for me to have you here and have this photo from Betty. Same with Robert Pinsky, who was a compatriot of my father. My father had so much admiration for you, and it's been passed on to me and to many, many, many others. And so the Berkeley connection lives on, and it's just wonderful to have you here in this context. And our moderator tonight, we're so lucky to have Nazila Fathi, a former New York Times correspondent and the author of The Lonely War, which was named as the best nonfiction of 2014 by The Guardian, Vogue, and Foreign Policy Association. She's written over 2,000 articles on politics, trade, and society in the Middle East. She's also written 5 children's books. In short, she knows a little bit about writing. So we are so happy to have Nazila here with us, and to have all of our panelists, to have Ellen and Michael, and mostly to have all of you join us for this conversation that I know will be so interesting and provocative, and hopefully will inspire all of you and the people you know and care about to think hard about why they write, maybe to be motivated to write even more, and to bring good thoughts and words and important ideas into the world. So please welcome our panelists.
It is on now. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Ellen and Steve, thank you so much for everything you did. I'm truly honored to be here with such great company and the other 40 authors in the book. I'm going to tell you my story, how I got into the book. The only reason I'm one of the 41 great authors in that book is because of Peggy sitting here. She is also one of the writers, and she suggested that I write for this book. And when Ellen told me if I wanted to write, I said yes. But I hadn't thought about what I was going to write. So after I said yes, I started thinking and thinking, because I wanted to be honest. Why did I write? Why do I write? I mean, truly, of course, we all say, like, I always wanted to write since I was a little girl. I knew that, but that's not really the truth. I'd become a reporter because I was curious, and I loved the fact that as a reporter, I could ask any question. But when it came to sitting down and writing the actual story, that was hard. That wasn't anything that I was looking forward to it. So for me, I had to do a lot of thinking. And then finally, I had this aha moment when I remembered this fictional character from really when I was 14 years old. I grew up in Iran, and I read a lot of European authors. And there was this author that is not very well known here, and I totally fell in love with his characters. And when I was truly sleeping with this question, why do I write? Suddenly I remembered Annette, the main character in this book, titled The Enchanted Soul. And I just realized that other people's writings truly shaped who I was. Their writing transcended time, countries, and everything that, is a part of our life. And just to refer to something that you wrote in your piece, just because after the book came out and I started reading other essays, I realized, oh my God, there are so many common threads. You write that writing is an extension of reading. I mean, when I wrote my piece, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be weird. I fell in love with reading, and that's why I started writing. But truly, I mean, there are so many common threads in this book that I started appreciating when the book came out, and I started reading the other pieces. So I'm going to stop here, and I want to read something from Ellen's essay, which I hope will help start our conversation. Ellen, I hope I get the tone right. I hate writing. Writing is hell. So I want to ask you, Julius, you're a lawyer, right?
Nope.
No?
I'm not a lawyer.
No, she's a lawyer. But you are supposed to, from your writing, I'm guessing, you are supposed to think on your feet. Is writing as hard for you?
Yes. Yeah. Is this on? Yes and no. First of all, I have to say, yes. First, I have to say how happy I am to be here, and not buying some books so that my wife will not hit me when I get home. I have been a customer in this store since it opened across the street. This is my favorite place to be. And the other irony for me, when you talk about driven to write, in the essay, when I talk about people who criticize me because I'm not like my father, and my response was, "Have you met my mother?" That's who drove me to write. And as grandparents, we send our grandchildren a little something every now and then, and we get a text back, "Thank you." Well, with my mother, it was, "You have to write a letter. Write a letter to your grandmother and thank her for sending you their money." And it was like that was the driving to write. The other part was the reading part. In the 1950s, I watched a lot of westerns, and there was also a series which I now have the DVD called Victory at Sea about World War II. And the westerns would start, "This is a true story of the Old West." And I would pull the encyclopedia down and read about the gunfight at OK Corral. And was that really right? And so I got hooked on history, which is why I was a history major in undergraduate school. And that was what drove me to write, a lot more. Yes, it is hell because it's difficult, especially in my line of work, and especially since I teach. One of my jobs early on at Howard University before I became the lobbyist was as the editor at a research institute, in which I realized there were a lot of PhDs and lawyers who couldn't write worth a damn. And I always edited and read, so they didn't like that, and neither do my students. But that's what sort of got me into it. And so when Peggy sent me an email and said, "Would you like to write?" If you all haven't figured out, she captured a couple of us. But she was just getting me back, because I also have to say that when I was Director of Congressional Affairs for the American Medical Association, I hired her as a lobbyist. And she's still one of the best lobbyists I've ever known. So I read her essay, which I thought was right on for the work that we still do. But that's what got me to writing. And reading others, I have a personal library of 3,000 books. I don't read fiction. And military history is what I read when I want to relax. And so you look at different styles of writing, and there are different people that you want to read, and I'm going to stop after this. The one person I am waiting for right now that I'm hoping he makes it is Robert Caro. I have read all of the LBJ books, and I'm patiently waiting for him to finish the last one. Hurry up, damn it.
Jane, you write asking why people write is like, oh, sorry. You write in your essay, asking people why they write is like asking why alcoholics drink.
My beloved mentor, Red Smith, who many of you probably read, and maybe as far back as the New York Herald Tribune and then the New York Times, said about writing, all you do is open up a vein and let it out drop by drop. That's why sports writers drink. I sort of think of myself as the comic relief here, Ellen. What am I doing with these guys, right? Yeah, it's not a choice. It is not a choice for me. I think, I had a family member who was an alcoholic, and people kept saying, well, why? Why? Well, that's what alcoholics do. And I think the same is true of writers. Writers write because they're writers. And I found early on that in assignments and stupid school stuff that you had to do, that writing was the only way to know what I thought. And so I don't get scared anymore when I can't think of the right word or the next sentence, because I know that if I just keep going, eventually something allegedly printable will emerge. I think my father was an entertainment lawyer, and he represented a lot of really good writers, one of whom was John le Carre, who lived with us between divorces and slept on a really uncomfortable bed that even for him, my parents didn't change. And he took me out to play tennis, and I think I was 10, and he beat me 6-love, I didn't get a point. That was one motivation to write, to get even. Joan Didion, who was another one of his clients, also inspired me. The spareness of her person, the thinness and lightness of her being, when people always think of her as being really heavy in material, her ability to capture things in just very brief staccato sentences with one word just took me over. And having dinner with her when I thought I was 13, but I was 16, because I was so intimidated that I thought I was 13. Just watching her watch was an astonishing experience. And what she was mostly watching was the other end of the table and thinking, why the hell did I get stuck sitting next to this kid? She was instructive, and some of you may have watched the film that her nephew did about her after John's death and after the last 2 books. And there's a story in there where she's talking about the story that she wrote about San Francisco. And the baby who was on the floor in Haight-Ashbury, inhaling drugs that had been left in this fabulous abode. And her nephew said, did you feel guilty about writing it? And she says, she looks at him and goes, oh my God, it was gold. That's a writer. Whether it's in journalism or in fiction or in poetry, that's the writer who doesn't turn away from that ugly fact, but insists that it has to be there.
Robert. Robert, can you tell us when exactly you knew you wanted to become a writer?
My wanting to be a writer is so related, Nazila, to what you said about reading. When I was maybe 7, 6, 8 years old, I didn't make much distinction between playing cowboys or knights, watching a movie about cowboys, reading about them, dreaming. It was all just story. I wasn't aware they were in different forms. And the Alice in Wonderland books, Through the Looking Glass, I was reading them all the time, by which I mean when I finished it, then I'd go back to page 1 and start reading it again. And when I wasn't reading it, it was going on in my brain. So there's no time when I wasn't reading those stories. And in this book, Lissa Muscatine sees a lot of books. She has to deal with a lot of them. A few minutes before we started, she said what I think too. It's like a lot of it's a game. Each of these are a little game. I can tell you, people, these pieces are short, they're often funny, and they're almost all about childhood. As Julius Hobson talked about being a child. When I was a child, I loved the Tennille illustrations. I loved the illustration Alice and the Fawn. So unlikely. She's got her arm around the fawn's neck. It's so unlikely, and it's beautiful. I loved it. And I love that part of the book the woods where things have no names. And they're walking along together, Alice and the fawn. And they're in the place where nothing, the trees aren't called trees. They're just where things have no names. And Alice says, this is so great about memory, I'm almost certain my name begins with an L. I think it begins with an L, which in a way it does. And then as they get towards the end, the fawn says, oh, I'm a fawn. You're a human girl. And then it jumps away. Can't be near you. And Alice said, well, I miss my friend, but at least I know my own name. That's some comfort. I wanted to read that story again. It's easy because I went back to the illustration. It was 3 sentences. I could put my hand over it. In my mind, it was like a feature film. It was supposed to take hours. And it was like this book I loved had played a trick on me. I had been deceived. I had been made to make up a very vivid, a mental movie or dream. And that, I think that's the moment when I decided I'd do the same trick. I'd cheat other people the same way. And that I had been the writer of every book I like. You collaborate. You know, if you're even the encyclopedia entry about the OK Corral, the reader creates the voiceover. So once you're reading, you're writing, I don't want to go on too long. I have to tell about Orlando Patterson's piece. Great sociologist. He's been an advisor to more than one Jamaican government. His piece is dedicated basically to his mom. It's called The Dress Writer. She was known as the best seamstress on the island. Women would come to her with an illustration from a magazine, an ad, and fabric. And the investment in that fabric was quite serious. If you messed up the fabric, it was a big, big disaster for everybody. Orlando's mother never used a paper pattern. She'd spread out the fabric, look at that picture in 17 or Mademoiselle, wherever it was, and he describes that moment when she's looking at the fabric. She's imagining each piece of that dress. She's got the scissors in her hand, dress writing. That's like when you're trying to think of a sentence. And his job as a little boy, when his mother was earning the family, there was no dad. His mother was working. Orlando Patterson's job was to read to her. And by reading to her and watching her expertise, that gave them their livelihood. That was the making of Orlando as a really extraordinary writer.
So writing is an extension of reading.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. The other thread that was almost across all these pieces was, again, as you mentioned, a lot of us wrote about ourselves when we were younger. And for a lot of us, it was thinking clearly about what happened, sometimes even about healing.
Yeah. And every family is different. Our friend Louise Glick, she writes about, in her family, we all talked all the time. We always interrupted one another. We talked constantly, not to communicate, to prevail. To hold forth. Yes. And as part of that competition in that family, you better become a writer.
The other thing that came up in different essays several times was Joan Didion. Can you tell us anything special about her?
About who?
Joan Didion.
No, not
And
me.
yeah, and Jane wrote about her too.
I reviewed that Thinking Magically, the year
Oh my
Thinking
God.
Magically in the New York Times Book Review. And it's really an amazing story about, among other things, about writing, as well as about death and about family. And I'll gossip very slightly. I had the occasion to be in a platform. I had the occasion to be in a platform with Joan Didion not long after this really, really enthusiastic review. And I'm here to tell you I don't have any great story about that. She was very shy and had very little to say.
Which is hard to imagine from her writing.
Yes, it threw me. I didn't know how to deal with it.
My dad was her lawyer, and he represented Joan and John, and John told him and wrote at one point that the reason that they never got divorced is they couldn't decide who would get mort in the settlement. So he was very involved in their lives. He arranged the adoption of their daughter Quintana Roo, who later died of alcoholism and other assorted other horrible diseases. And what he said to me when I would get stuck, which everybody does, right? He'd snarl and he'd say, "Writer's right. You know, shut the fuck up, writer's right." And what I didn't put in there is that he said it to Joan too. And the thought that Joan Didion had those moments, whew, that was liberating. I mean, if that can happen to her, it can happen to any of us. She came here, I don't know, did anybody go to the Avalon Theater when she was going around with Blue Nights, which is the story of Quintana Roo's death, and it's the piece that came after A Year of Magical Thinking, and it is harrowing. It's just a horribly harrowing book. And so what her very wise publisher did is they made a film so that she didn't have to read, because reading that aloud over and over and over again on a book tour would have been, talk about opening your wrist and letting it out. So I was sitting right up front because I wanted to see her and could see the screen really, really well. And she's reading the part about Quintana Roo's wedding on St. John the Divine on Amsterdam Avenue. And they flash this picture of the cutting of the cake, and there's my father, pushing forward through the crowd to be where he could see Joan and John and where they could see him. He was no longer their lawyer. He couldn't see anymore. He could barely hear. And for obvious reasons, they wanted a lawyer who could see and hear. But there he was. There's this, you talk about a magical moment. And the way things connect, in whether it's writing or it's whatever visual medium it is, suddenly those connections they're mind-boggling. And the one other thing I would say, Robert, I wonder if you feel this way too, there's an addictive quality about writing. Because after all those times when somebody needs to say, "Shut up, writer's right," there's a moment when you get the word right. Usually for me, it's in the shower. And then I have to bolt out of there to write it down before I forget. But there's a moment where it's like something catches fire, and it's like that, and then it goes dead, like a piece of coal that's been lit and then goes quiet and at cold. But that feeling for that millisecond when you say, "That's it," that is addictive.
Yes.
I've never heard anybody put it like that, but I agree.
Shower moment, you mean?
I'm sorry?
The shower moment?
No, mine's not usually the shower.
Where is it?
You'll never know.
I think we can open it to questions.
Thank you.
And if you have a question, we have a microphone right over here.
Thank you. And you all have fascinating stories. But as Jane Leavy was talking, I just can't help wondering, you were obviously a trailblazer being a sports reporter. And I want to know how you became so interested in sports and wrote all those sports books at a time when maybe that wasn't all that common. And I just don't want to leave until I know the answer to that question.
Come on September 28th. I'll tell the whole story. This is about this.
Especially the Sandy Koufax.
I actually think that John le Carre had a lot to do with it. Getting beat by him on a tennis court like that, oh, man. I wanted to know how you did it better than that. I'll be glad to talk to you about it later.
Oh, okay. Okay. Not related to the writing, but
Thank you.
I enjoy
appreciate it.
listening to that.
My question is for Robert Pinsky. You once mentioned, I never forgot this, that writing poetry, you started about riding the trains, listening to the stations, Hoboken, Teaneck. Talk about this thing of sound in writing.
For me, Ethelbert Miller knows exactly what I'm talking about. He is a victim of the same addiction as me. And for me, writing is a misnomer. We're using the wrong word. It's not this. It's not the big pencil or the keyboard. It happens here. It's composing. And the passage Ethelbert is thinking about, I used to hear, for me, it was making up obscene lyrics, the famous radio jingles, hearing very expert joke tellers tell jokes. And I talk about in the old New Jersey railroad, the conductor will say, "Passengers going to Hoboken, change trains at Summit." And in my mind, I would hear, "Passengers going to Hoboken, change trains at Summit. Passengers going to Hoboken, change trains at Summit." And those three decelerating triplets, passengers going to Hoboken, change trains at Summit. And I would just be playing it in my head and thinking about how to do it and forget to get off the train. Thank
Robert,
you, Ethelbert.
do you read aloud to yourself to make sure that it's right?
I'm tempted to join you, Julius Hobson, saying you don't know when I get. For me, when I'm about to go to sleep, I try to recite whatever I've been working on to myself. And if I get to a part where I can't do it, then I have to turn the light on and look at it and see what can I do better. And it has to be memorized. It has to be in your body. For me, composing poetry is a bodily art. It's like dancing or playing music. I more and more perform my poems with very, very good musicians. As Lissa said, I have my album is the same title as the book Proverbs of Limbo. And for me, it all happens here. And indeed, if it's American Sign, that also is bodily. And the two signs for poetry, I forget, but one is the sign for writing, and it's dancing. And the other is the sign, and it comes from your heart.
Robert, I'm going to ask Nazila, could I now do the quick thing that I can go up here?
Or I can give you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to bounce off what Robert is saying and make a connection between the childhood thread and sound and also loss. I'm going to read just a few lines from Louise Glick's piece that's in the book. Thanks, Michael. Could one of you hold up the picture? Thank you. Okay, it's related. She begins her piece. Louise died. Louise is a dear decades-long friend of Robert's and mine, and she died just under 2 years ago. And Michael and I were so fortunate to actually have her piece for this volume right before she died, actually. Okay, so she begins her piece. It seems to me that I have wanted to write for the whole of my life. The intensity of this insistence, despite its implausibility, suggests an emotional rather than literal accuracy. I think my life didn't seem my life until I started to write. And then the thing that has to do with sound and with the cover of the book. She writes a little later on. I had the sound of doggerel in my head. Her father used to write limericks and doggerel. I had the sound of doggerel in my head as far back as memory goes. I knew how rhyme worked. I heard the way rhythmic patterns conferred a strange sense of wholeness and inevitability. I began to write my own versions of this sort of poem, little bleak existential ditties, using the vocabulary available to me at, say, 5 years old. The age of the child in the picture, who's not Louise, but they're both 5 years old. And this is what she wrote. If kitty cats liked roast beef bones and doggies sipped up milk, if elephants walked around the town all dressed in purest silk, if robins went on coasting, they slid down, crying wee. If all this happened to be true, then where would people be? She's 5 years old. And that is in a way, this is my speaking my own tribute in memory of our dear friend. Thanks.
All right, you two look afraid. Julius, you're a teacher. You're a mentor. You were my mentor, and you edited my work, and it pissed me off. That's how good a writer he is. That's why I recommended him. There are a lot of young people in the audience. What are some couple of things you see in the writing from your students that you want to correct? You want to tell all these guys, don't do that, or do that differently?
Well, first of all, I'm going to pay you back. This is the last paragraph in Peggy's essay.
Oh, jeez.
This writer's journey is one of many misguided attempts to mimic authors.
No, keep the mic down.
This writer's journey is one of many misguided attempts to mimic authors of classic literature, political theorists, philosophers, and journalists. That journey brought me to legislative advocacy, a place where feeling, thinking, reason, and persuasion all live in a peaceful coexistence in a decidedly unpeaceful place. Don't get me started on Twitter. That's the problem that I have with students today, I've been teaching 32 years grad school. I've only taught undergrad 3 years, which I'll never do again. And I can tell you, probably starting with George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind, where it all became about test scores and less about writing. And so by the time they showed up in my classes, I started seeing students who couldn't write, who didn't understand subject and verb agreement, who didn't understand punctuation, or that a sentence is not a paragraph long, or that Twitter, or X now, or Instagram, or any of that other shit is not writing. And so it is a problem, and I try to use it as a teaching moment. I went through an issue with a student last semester, and my syllabus is 35 pages long, which is why some people don't take my class. But the whole first page is what your requirements are, and you have to get your assignment in on time. You email it to me. It's due at midnight. If it comes at 12:01, it's late. So I had a student who literally clicked send at 11:58, and I got it at 12:03. Well, that meant the highest grade he could get was a B+. So he went and complained to the director of the program, who asked me about, can you give him some grace? And I said, well, he's had a whole semester to write this. I said, in my world, if you have to comment on regulations and the comments are due by 5 p.m. on Friday at 5:01, they don't read yours. And it's sort of getting them to get that discipline to write. And I always say that in my childhood that I was wasn't always happy about it. When I finished the 9th grade, and I thought, I'm gonna have the summer off. My mother put me in a 6-week writing course at Howard University. And I thought, that's how I'm gonna spend my summer. But as you get older, those things sort of come back. So I'm not like these folks where, I'm writing books and anything like that. Peggy and I live in a world where precise language matters, where a misplaced semicolon or comma throws the whole piece of legislation off and can cause
The
problems.
Second Amendment?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that too. And so those are the kinds of things that I find to be hard. But she's right. I realize that I'm mimicking my mother, which is what I did with you and everybody else. Was I would say, you can do this better. You can do better, and she did, and I've had a lot of students who have, and I will say that some students haven't. But it is, it's still comforting to me that I've taught as many as I have, and I think that's what's important. But also I think the reading is, and I have a whole section of the library on presidents, and I have more books on Abraham Lincoln than anybody else, than any other president. And there's no other president who could write as well as he could, and whether it's the Gettysburg Address or his second inaugural address, even short things, and it's sort of, I wish I could write like that. I'm going to keep trying, and I try to convey that to students. So so now in my world, if I have 16 students in a class and 3 of them hit it, I think I did good. Because that's what I think is important, is just hoping that as I say to students at the beginning of every semester, we have different objectives. You came in here to get an A. I want you to learn something. If the two come together, that's good. But since I make the rules, you could either learn or not get an A. But it's doing, and then seeing them later when they say, as Peggy just said to me, as one of my colleagues, you made me do this, you made me do that. I really appreciate that, and that's what is really really grateful.
Thank you. Nazila, I got one for you. So Nazila's story, which she didn't really tell you, but you're still going to buy the book, right? Is a story, as I interpret it, as writing for a really different reason, right? So your beginning, why you started to write, was because you're a writer. But writing could have caused your death. Writing was dangerous for you. I think we're living in pretty scary times right now, and maybe people need to hear that part of your story, if you don't mind sharing.
Thank you. I didn't realize that. I never thought of it that way, but you're right, not just for me, but for many other people. So as a reporter, there was a time in my life that I was in Iran, and one of the biggest uprisings in the country occurred in 2009. And I'd been 9 years old when the Iranian revolution took place, and my life changed forever because I had to grow up under the Islamic Republic, and the new regime put a lot of restrictions on my life as a woman. So when I became a reporter, part of it was my curiosity to figure out what had happened, where this country was going. And every time there was an uprising, everybody, including me, we thought, this is it. This is the time of change. So in 2009, when one of the biggest uprisings happened, I really thought this was the time for the change that I was looking for my entire adult life. And the uprising was on such a large scale that the government freaked out and kicked out all the foreign reporters in the country. I wrote for the New York Times, but I was also Iranian, so they couldn't kick me out. But they told me that I couldn't write about the uprising. But this was the biggest story in my life. And I thought I had a duty. I kept going out, I kept writing about it until I started getting phone calls that my picture was given to snipers to shoot me. I thought they were just threatening me. And then just about a day later, my house came under surveillance. There were militia forces outside my home. And I got scared even to leave my house. So just one night with 2 little kids, I went to the airport, left the country, and have never been back. So, and then I became the story. And that's when I started writing personal stories about, part of it was to figure out what had happened, was looking for a kind of healing, to see what happened to my life. Nothing happened to the country. This was about 15 years ago. The regime is still in power. There was a war just last month. They're still in power. So I wrote to figure out what was happening to a country of 80 million people. Everybody waiting for change, and it never happens. So thank you for asking that question. Yeah, writing personal stories are very different than writing as a reporter. They become much more emotional, more powerful, and then you also write from the heart. But in honor of our students here, I want to ask Julius, maybe our final question, because we have to wrap up in 5 minutes too. If you were going to recommend 3 books to make because I'm a mother of 2 young students, 20 and 21, and I would love to make them better writers. If you were going to recommend 3 books, what books do you recommend?
I don't know. That's a difficult question. I got to pass on that.
I'm going to interrupt with advice to the high school students. High school students, this is serious advice for you. Contrive, if it's possible, to have Julius Hobson's mother.
That's right.
If you can't do that, imagine her and internalize that idea.
That works.
Julius, 1 book, because they took out their notebooks.
That's still difficult for me in terms of what I would suggest. Oh yeah, okay. We'll start with that. Because you don't know, I will say you don't know what will inspire you. I know I was an undergraduate student at Howard, and you had to take a sequence. And so one of the sequences was Greek literature and translation, which was taught by Dean Snowden, who was the authority on blacks in antiquity. And everybody said, don't take that class. I sat on the front row of that class. I read the Iliad. I read the Odyssey. It was one of my favorite classes of, the entire time I was there, because the writing was so good and his teaching was so good, and it inspired me to read more. And I think that think about the teacher. If you, instead of asking me a book, if you'd ask me about a teacher, who was I can name teachers, one of my favorite was the band instructor when I was in high school. His name was Williams, and he was more than just the band instructor because he taught life. And so he was outstanding. Olive Taylor, who taught history when I was at Howard, was another one. I was 4 years Army ROTC at Howard. 2 of the commanders of the detachment there were the same kind of people that, as teachers, inspired you to learn. And I think that was important.
I think that's a great answer, and it's reminding me of a saying that was around when I was an undergraduate at Stanford, and it was along the lines of, Robert, you can correct me if this is right, go with the horses, not with the courses.
Yeah.
The particular people, not horses, not courses.
Even if they're the hardest ones, go with them. In fact, my last one, whose name I can never remember, was the leading Black constitutional historian in the United States. The first semester I took his class, I got a D. I took that class again because I realized how good he was, and it was sequenced because, history was to 1865 and since 1865, and I took both. He was a great inspiration. And I guess this will be the last question.
We are unfortunately out of time. I want to just remind all of you that you can purchase copies of the book up front. I think Ellen and Mike will be staying behind to sign if you want a signed copy. And I have one last question, just saying. But before I get to my last question, and it's a true or false question, and you may not elaborate. You have to go true or false. So I'm just warning you. And if you don't mind folding up your chairs and putting them to the side on a bookshelf or something sturdy, that will be a great assistance to our staff. And thank you all for coming. And here's my true or false question. Great writers are born, good writers are made. True or false? Jane?
True.
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 The point of your book. And there we have it. Convincingly from our 4 panels. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Siegel students. And hang around and buy a few books and browse and do whatever you need to do. And thank you for putting your chairs to the side.